Hello, orchestras. It's Mr. Heinz again. I hope you guys had a good weekend and got well rested, and we're ready to start week 9 of our school closure time. We've touched on all the major intervals that are available to us in our sequence of scales. This week, we're going to look at the minor intervals. So, a lot of the numbers in the numerical system, fifths, thirds, fourths, sixths, sevenths, seconds, they're all going to be the same. But now instead of talking about major distances, we're going to talk about minor distances. So bear in mind that the measurements from starting note to upper note are going to be the same kind of spatial distance, but how large or small they are is going to change a little bit. So bear with it. There's going to be a lot of new information, but I know you guys can handle it. Let's get started. All right, everybody, welcome back. So here's going to be intervals part 2, the Fantastic Five. Although really, I guess I should have called them the minor five, since the majority of them are minor intervals. But I digress. We'll call them the Fantastic Five for now. But not like those really bad Fantastic Four movies. We won't talk about those. So we have already covered 8 of the possible 13 intervals. All of the intervals with the capital P and the capital M's. Now we're going to look at the last 5. So we're going to look at the 4 minor intervals highlighted with the green arrows. And we're going to look at the 2 intervals pointed out with red arrows. Now, these don't have M's or P's to describe them. We see one of them has a capital A, one of them has a lowercase d. We're going to spend probably the majority of this lecture on those intervals. And for this purpose, let's think of those as basically the same interval. They're spelled different. They have different notes, but the sound is going to be the same. And when we get to those slides, I'll explain a little bit more. So, most of the intervals we're going to look at today are the minor intervals. Minor intervals are a half step lower than their major companions. Minor intervals are shown with the lowercase m. So rather than putting a capital M next to whatever number the interval is, we're going to use a lowercase m if it's a minor interval. Minor intervals are often found when playing music in a minor key signature. Now, for the purposes of this lecture, we're going to stay in C major in treble clef. So rather than switching up keys, we're going to just stay with the idea that C is the foundation, and we're going to base all of our notes around that. You still count up the lines and spaces to find the number, but now we have to pay attention to the actual note names and the way that it sounds. So if you take a note here, or take a look here, we have 2 intervals. Both of them have a C and a D, but you'll notice that the one on the left has a D flat. So this one is going to be a minor second because those notes are much closer together than the major second, which is a C and a D natural. Notice too that the minor second has a lowercase m, and the major second has an uppercase or capital M. All right, so we get to our first interval here, the minor second. The distance from C to D flat is 1 half step, C to D flat, and we call this interval a minor second. Now, this interval was made popular in the John Williams score for Jaws in the shark leitmotif. The leitmotif is played on a double bass, playing a minor second between E and F natural. This is what that sounds like. Everyone knows that, and every time we hear that, it's synonymous with a shark attack. Now, here's what would happen if we were to play the 2 notes, but now as a major second. It does not sound nearly as ominous or dangerous. You're not going to scare too many people with that. All right, so now we have the minor third. The distance from C to E flat is 3 half steps. So C, up a half step to D flat, up again to D, then up again to E flat. And we call this interval a minor third. Notice here on the staff that there are still 3 lines that separate C and E. So if you were to count the lines and spaces between, you'd have C, go up here, D, go up one more, E. 1, 2, 3. But now we notice that it's an E flat, so we have to lower this third by a half step, since we're in the key of C major. Some song examples are Greensleeves, and there's a link provided here in the title. My middle schoolers will know the Cello Squadron theme. That is also the beginning of Ride of the Valkyries, and that also has a minor third at the beginning. Now, it dawned on me, I was thinking, well, what's something a little more relative to maybe you guys? The bass line in the Billie Eilish song Bad Guy, built on minor thirds, goes like this. So that interval, C to E flat, makes the minor third sound. We consider this minor third to be definitely the money note when it comes to deciding whether a key signature or a scale is going to be minor or major. All right, it's time. Let's talk about this thing. So we have the augmented fourth / diminished fifth. I promise you, I have not lost my mind. So let's talk about this. The distance between C and F sharp is 6 half steps. And you can see the half steps labeled beside it. Now, we learned from our previous work on intervals that C to F is a perfect fourth. It's the Here Comes the Bride interval. So C to F. But this is C to F sharp. So rather than, we're going to go up even more. We still are going to call this a fourth because it's still C to F. And C, D, E, F are 4 notes apart. But because it's bigger than your normal F natural, we're going to call this an augmented fourth. Augmented meaning it's bigger or stretched out further than normal. So we have an interval that's not quite a fourth, but not quite a fifth. So we call this an augmented fourth. Related to this, the distance between C and G, that should say G flat, apologies. C and G flat is also 6 half steps. Instead of using sharps, we would spell it out with flats, and those are shown there. But we learned in the last slide that C to G is a perfect fifth. The Star Wars theme, right? So this can't be right either, because getting up to G would mean it be too big. So we're going to call this a diminished fifth. We're going to take that G and make it flat. So instead of C to G, we have C to G flat. But now we have an interval that is also not quite a fourth, but not quite a fifth. We've played the same sounds. Here's C to F sharp. Here's C to G flat. Sounds the same, but 2 different names for the same thing. So in essence, to our ears, they're the same thing. But depending on how they're spelled in your music will determine whether it's an augmented fourth or a diminished fifth. So in this example, if you have a C to an F sharp, we know that C to F is a fourth, and you add a sharp to it, makes it higher than a normal fourth, so we call it augmented. If you have a C to a G, we know that's a fifth, but because it's flat, we're going to scrunch our fifth up a little bit, and we're going to call it a diminished fifth. Means we made our fifth smaller. And there's a classic meme to help you out with that. Now, there's a general overarching nickname that we give this certain sound. We call this a tritone, and we write it with 2 capital T's. Because this interval is made out of 3 whole steps, it is often nicknamed the tritone or triple tone. I'll spell that out for you in ways other than half steps. So if I have C to F sharp, in between there is C to D, that's a whole step, D to E, E to F sharp. This is kind of the sound you get like in like Zelda when you open up a box, right? So with these distances, you get 3 whole steps. So we call it tritone. This was also referred to as the devil's tone because of the way the two notes clash. Sometimes people think this sounds almost like a train whistle coming down the tracks. Medieval composers thought that this interval spoiled melodies and entire pieces. So monks and medieval composers who worked for the church would oftentimes look through the music that people would write and try to find if there were any accidental tritones lurking around. And if so, you had to rewrite that part of the music so that set of notes did not exist. So it didn't bother anybody. So I've played the tritone for you a couple of times. There are some examples that are heard throughout music involving the tritone. We're not so scared of it now. So example would be a police siren in Europe. Oftentimes you hear something like this. Some sort of emergency vehicle coming down. There is a wonderful musical, or opera rather, called West Side Story, written by Leonard Bernstein. And Leonard Bernstein uses tons and tons of tritones in his writing for that. So I would check out some of that. There's a link there showing some examples of it. And any of you hard rock kiddos out there, check out the band Rush. They have a song called YYZ. The whole beginning of the song is nothing but a bunch of tritones and really weird key signatures. So if you're interested in some louder music involving that, go ahead and check that out. Our last two intervals, the minor sixth and the minor seventh. So again, C to A is a sixth, we know this, but C to A flat is a half step lower, so we call this a minor sixth. An example would be The Entertainer, which we've all heard, I'm sure. I apologize for my playing there. But it starts off basically after the two notes with a set of minor sixth. After that, we have C to B flat, and we know that C to B is a major seventh, but we lower it a half step, so we call it a minor seventh, a little smaller than usual. A song example would be Somewhere from West Side Story. And there's a really quick 1-minute clip of a phenomenal singer performing Somewhere. Her first couple of notes are a minor seventh. So check out these 5 intervals, go back and listen to some examples of them, and study up on how the notes are related to the note C so we can learn those distances. This is a nice critical time where we can start hearing these certain sounds, and if we can start kind of committing them to memory, it'll be so much easier for us to play our music in orchestra. So you'll know what sounds you're supposed to be looking for and what kind of flavors that are needed in our music.